Добрый день, уважаемые коллеги.
Good afternoon, distinguished colleagues. I'm glad to see you all here in good mood, in the desire to ask questions. As we did last year, I will begin by telling you about some results of our work for the year, and then I will try to answer your questions. Well, first, and the main thing is the economic parameter, the growth of the GDP for the last 10 months has been 0.7 or maybe 0.6%. Yesterday we had a meeting with my colleagues and we made the figure more precise. And the trade balance surplus has grown by $13.3 billion to be $148.4 billion. After the pause of last year, we've had some increase in our industrial production. For the last 10 months, the growth was 1.7%. The level of unemployment is quite low. It was even less than 5% before. Now it is about 5.1%. The agro-industrial complex is continuing to develop. I believe that at year-end its growth would be 3.3%. And as you know, this year we had a record harvest, 104 million tons of grains. And despite all the turbulence on the financial markets, the federal budget this year will be having a profit in it. That means that incomes would be higher than spendings by 1.2 trillion rubles. That's about 1.9% of the GDP. The Minister of Finance is still calculating the precise figure, but it is for sure that the budget would have a profit. The main outcome of the year in the social sphere is, of course, a positive demographic dynamics. The natural growth of population for the last 10 months was 37.1 thousand people. The death rate is decreasing now, and the birth rate is increasing, which is a very good trend. And of course, we must do everything in order to keep it. As we promised, we are continuing to index the mother capital. In 2014, it was 429,408 rubles. We have achieved and even overcome the target parameters of the salaries on 10 categories of employees for the 2014. We are speaking about the social teachers, teachers at schools, professors at universities, senior and medium and junior medical staff, cultural workers, doctors, etc. In 2014, we have indexed the pensions twice. Since 1st February by 6.5% and since April by 1.7% more. We have paid a lot of attention this year to increasing the combat capacity of our armed forces. I will not name all the things here, I'll just name you the social parameter. In 2014, 11,700 military servicemen of the Ministry of Defense have received their permanent housing, and 17,300 servicemen have received their corporate housing. That is 100% of our annual plans. These have been some figures, and now some words about the current situation. I believe that all of us understand that the main question of today, which is of interest to the citizens of our country, is the state of economy, the national currency, and the future development of the situation in the social sphere in this regard. And I will try, briefly, with several sentences, to describe the situation to you and to inform you on my opinion on how it will develop. And after that, I believe the press conference would be finished. But if you have some maybe questions to guide me, I will try to answer those. Of course, this situation has been provoked by external factors, first and foremost, but we believe that a lot has not been done by us, of which we planned in diversifying our economy for the last 2 decades. It was quite difficult to do everything, especially taking into account the favorable economic situation when the money was invested by business to the areas with the maximum and quick profits. It was quite difficult to rebuild the mechanism. Today the situation has changed, as you know, and foreign economic factors are influencing it. First of all, I'm speaking about the oil price, which is followed by the gas price as well. I believe that central bank and the government are taking adequate measures in the current situation. Of course, there are questions to the government or to the central bank about the time frame of these measures, whether they are timely. But on the whole, the direction is correct. I hope that the yesterday's and today's decrease of the exchange rate of the foreign currency and raising the growth of the cost of ruble will maintain. Is that possible? Yes. Whether oil prices will continue to fall down and influence the national currency and inflation, that is possible too. What are we going to do about this? We are going to use the measures which we used quite successfully in 2008. And in this situation, we will have to focus our attention on assistance to people who do need it. And I'd like to highlight that we need to keep or maintain all our planned parameters on social issues and problems. First of all, I'm speaking about the pensions, the salaries of the budget employees, etc. Of course, if the situation will develop in an unfavorable manner, we will have to make some adjustments to our plans, and of course we'll have to reduce something, but of course, and I'd like to highlight that, as experts say, jumping to plus, then further growth and favorable solution to this situation is unavoidable for 2 reasons. First, the growth of the global economy will maintain. I'm speaking about the rates of growth are slowing down, but the economy will grow in itself, and our economy will overcome the current situation. How much time is needed for that? I believe about 2 years in the worst scenario. And I repeat that after that the growth is imminent, because the foreign economic situation will change. The growth of the global economy will need additional energy resources, but for the time, which I have no doubts about, we'll be able to do a lot in diversifying our economy, because the life itself will be making us do that. We wouldn't be able to function and survive otherwise. So on the whole, and I repeat, this is imminent. We will fulfill our social obligations basing on the existing reserves, which we have, thank God, and they have even grown this year. I'll remind you that the central bank reserves are $419 billion, and the central bank is not going to waste them, which is correct, and the reserves of the government, the National Welfare Fund and the Reserve Fund of the government, have grown this year by about 2.4–2.5 trillion rubles. The total amount of the reserves is 8.4 trillion of rubles, and I believe, basing on these reserves, we will solve the main social issues, we will diversify our economy, and it is unavoidable and imminent that the situation will become normal. With this, I'd like to finish the introduction. Well, we may finish the press conference as well, but if you have the questions, I will answer them. Okay, you know, this year I'd like to begin with those who have been working for the whole year together with the President. I'd like to begin with the Kremlin pool. And the first I'll give the floor to Vyacheslav Terikov, the doyen of the Kremlin pool, who has been working with the President for many years, who's been going with him to all the corners of our planet. That's, I believe, is baptism. Well, but I have an interesting job. I like to ask you, Mr. President, the situation in the country shows that there's a deep foreign currency crisis now. How do you think, for the 2 years which you have mentioned, will we go through a financial and economic crisis? And there have been a lot of criticism for during the Black Monday and Tuesday, the Black for the Ruble, I mean. There have been a lot of criticism for the government. Do you agree with the criticism? Well, I've said that in the most unfavorable scenario of the foreign economic situation, the existing situation would last for about 2 years. But I believe that it is not a necessary scenario, because the situation might improve earlier. It might begin improving in the first quarter, in the middle of the next year, or at the end of next year. No one could tell that for sure. A lot of factors of uncertainty exist there. As far as the central bank activities are concerned, well, I do not think I could call the situation the crisis, or you may call it whatever you want. But I believe that I said quite clearly that the central bank and the government on the whole are acting correctly and adequately to the situation existing. I believe that some things, well, the criticism is voiced from the experts as well. I believe that some actions could have been made quicker, but I believe that the quickness must be the pragmatic approach which actually the central bank and the government is doing. What are they doing? They have risen the key interest rate, and I believe that this rate would not be raised for all the period of those difficult circumstances linked with the foreign economic situation, but in this or that way I believe the economy will adjust. Why am I optimistic? Because the economy will adjust to life and work in the conditions of the low fuel prices, low oil prices. This will happen. The question is how quickly such adjustments will take place. If the prices will remain low or will be even lower, maybe lower than $60 per barrel, even $40 per barrel, the figure doesn't matter here. The economy will structure itself. How quickly it will do so, it is difficult to say, but it will happen, and I'd like to highlight it, because the life gives us its facts. And what is the central bank doing? It raised the interest rate. What does it have to do, and what is it doing else? else? What else is it doing? In order to stabilize the national currency, we might squeeze up the ruble liquidity a little bit. We might give access to the participants of the economic activity to the currency, foreign currency liquidity, and the central bank is doing that. His rate on the currency is 0.5. The central bank must feel it themselves how exactly to act. We mustn't give away our forex reserves and not waste them in the market, but we must give the loan resources to people, and the central bank is doing that. One of the tools is the so-called repo, which happens that they give a loan to a month, a year, a week, or a day. And this is returnable money, which gives an opportunity to the participants of the economic activity to use the currency resources. It is done correctly, but maybe it must be done a bit more quickly. Well, of course, I see and hear the criticism towards the central bank, towards the president of the central bank. The criticism might be grounded or not, but the government must not forget about its responsibility either. You must work with the same exporters which have good currency benefits. The chairman of the government met the leaders of our largest companies, and there are some results that have come from this meeting. Of course, some of them, or many of them, need to pay their loans and need to think about the situation in their companies, because a company, just as a citizen, always thinks about how to save something for the worst times, etc. It is a correct economic behavior or not. Economic logic shows that it is not, but the companies are doing that nevertheless. But we see that there are still positive results for that. And we need to take some other measures. I mean, the government. What am I talking about? I'm talking about fighting inflation, which is the task of the central bank, first and foremost, but there are some things which we have mentioned, by the way, publicly. I mentioned that when we met with the government, which must be managed by the government. For example, the fuel prices, I mean the gasoline prices, the food prices, this has to be tackled with by the government. And you must work with that manually. You should monitor it every day, every week. You should meet the producers, the market participants, the trade networks, the retailers, the oil companies which have monopolized our market a lot. Our Federal Anti-Monopoly Service should work well, and all those actions should be joint and collective and should not intrude with the inner competence of the central bank and the government, but the coordination must be there and it should be timely. Of course, we might criticize Ms. Nabiullina, but on the whole, we mustn't forget that their policy is adequate. And it is not only the central bank which is responsible for the economic situation in the country, not alone. Another man from the presidential pool, Alexander Gamov, the Komsomolskaya Pravda newspaper, if you have a question, of course. Well, Alexander Gamov, the Komsomolskaya Pravda. First of all, I have something to say. Mr. Putin, I think that a lot of us have been waiting for your press conference now, and everyone was thinking what was the mood of Mr. Putin, because the mood of the country depends on the Putin. And you have smiled for some times, and thank you for your optimism. We hope that everything will be as you said. And now to my question. Since 2008, we have been speaking about going away from the oil needle, rebuilding, restructuring our economy, making it more efficient. But the current situation shows that we are still on that oil needle, and we do not know how long we will remain there. What do you think? Will we be able to use the current crisis for good in order to restructure our economy? Of course, I understand that it wouldn't be done quickly, but still. And second, in your address to the Federal Assembly, you have mentioned a number of a number of benefits for the business and for economy, and you understand that the main danger in Russia is bureaucracy and like stalling of the implementation of correct decisions, including the decisions of the president. Are you sure now that your thoughts and decisions which you expressed in your speech will be implemented this time, and this optimism will be confirmed with real steps? Thank you.
You know, we can only be sure when we have an insurance, but in this case, we can only ensure ourselves by implementing the right macroeconomic policy and having the right reserves and funds for addressing the economic issues. This is, I suppose, a good insurance that could make us feel confident. Speaking about the red taping and stalling the reforms, that is what I can tell you. There must be some colleagues here from the European Union, for example. If you ask them about their red tape and bureaucracy, you'll realize that in our country bureaucracy is nothing compared to the European Union. In our country bureaucracy is not the main problem. You know what the main problem is? At the very beginning, when I said that I will make an introduction and then the press conference could be over, it does not even seem to be a joke. The thing is that the main problem is not stalling the decisions. The thing is that when macroeconomic situation pushes the participants to invest into the energy sector, or the chemistry, or the metallurgical sector, then no matter what the government does in order to improve the tax tools and regulating the non-commodity sectors, it is still a very difficult process because we do not have enough budget resources to implement those reforms. For many years now, we've been trying to improve the business climate and to facilitate positive development of the situation in the real sector. But the process is a difficult one. It is getting especially difficult when you can get much more profit investing into the energy sector. About 80% of requests to the government are not related to investing into highly technological areas. The people are mostly applying for a chance to produce energy resources and to have access to fields. But you know, when the economic conditions get different, the life itself pushes us to investing into other areas. And this is what makes me optimistic, however strange it may sound. Yes, we will have to face some difficulties, and we'll definitely have to address some social issues and to fulfill our social obligations that contained in May decrees signed by the President in 2012. But still, I suppose we can benefit from the situation in order to diversify our economy and create beneficial conditions for businesses. I do hope that today economic situation will help us to do so. Let us continue, distinguished colleagues. Could you please make your questions shorter so that we could listen to Mr. Putin more? Andrei Kolesnikov, your question, please. We could not proceed without you. Andrei Kolesnikov, Kommersant. Mr. Putin, at the beginning of 2012, in one of your pre-election articles that then transformed into the President's decrees dated of May 2012, you characterized the current situation and quoted Mr. Gorchakov, who said that Russia is focusing. What do you think is happening to the country at the moment? What do you think is the country doing? Is it still focusing or concentrating? Or do you think it is the right moment to deconcentrate or just relax, finally? Well, what we have to do is to work. Nothing has basically changed in this regard. And, as I've just said, the current conditions are actually pushing us to further continue the reforms. I see that you and your colleagues from different newspapers raise the same issue. What we have to do is to work. And external conditions only have to make us work more and more efficiently. What we need for the future of our economy is to create favorable conditions and friendly business environment. We have to provide for the freedom of entrepreneurship. We also have to guarantee the property rights. We have to stop using law enforcement agencies to punish everyone whom they don't like. We have to stop using those tools as tools of competition. We also have to work on our industrial sector and to provide for the rise of the regions of the Federation that require more attention, like the Far East, for example. Whether we do that or not, yes, we've been doing that for quite a time already. We've also provided for tax holidays for 4 years. What I'm referring to is the inspection holidays for 3 years in relation to those enterprises that did not get that were not criticized for any severe violations of the tax law for 3 years. What we have to do is to go on concentrating and to work, to take practical actions. And TV, Mr. Kondratiev, please, your question. NTV channel, Mr. Kondratiev. We recently celebrated the 25th anniversary of the fall of the Berlin Wall, and you and I witnessed the fall when we worked back then in the country, in Germany. There were many aspirations, and due to your insistence, Russia was even close to cancelling, to achieving visa-free regime with the European Union. This is an anniversary year when we are witnessing building a new wall. It is not a concrete wall, but it is a wall of mutual criticism, mutual suspicions. And what is your forecast? Where do you think this trend can take us? Do you think that we are going to live in a divided world? Or do you think we can do anything in order to restore the dialogue and cooperation? You've just mentioned that the Berlin Wall fell, and what we are witnessing at the moment is building new walls. I am going to answer your question, and I hope that you will agree with me. It is not what we are witnessing at the moment. You yourself are an expert in relations with Germany. After the Berlin Wall fell, didn't they tell us that there would be NATO expansion? There were 2 waves of NATO's expansion. Isn't that a wall? Don't you think it is when they started building the wall? It is a virtual wall. And what about ABM system near our borders? No one stopped. This is the problem. Our partners did not stop. They decided that they were winners. They believed that they were an empire, and all other countries were vassals. And what they had to do was to exercise more pressure. And I mentioned that in my address to the Federal Assembly. They did not stop building new walls, in spite of all our attempts and gestures, intended to show that we were going to work together, that we wanted to work together in Europe and in the world. And I hope that we will stick to quite a tough position, especially in relation to situations like the Ukraine crisis. And we want our partners to understand that the best way is to stop building those walls and to start building a united, a single humanitarian space of security and economic liberty, of economic freedom. You know, I saw a poster there. Dmitry Sergeyevich, will you please apologize me? I'd like to give the floor to our colleagues from the Ukraine. Roman Sambaluk, Union Agency. I'd like to ask 2 short questions, please. The first question is about the punitive operation that you organized in the east of our country. This operation was intended against the Russian-speaking population. It is not a secret that Russian combatants, Russian militias are fighting there, and this is them who organized that. How many of them did you send there? How many Russian militants did you send? And what about heavy vehicles and equipment that you sent there? How many people died? And you, being the commander-in-chief of the Russian Federation, what could you say to the widows and families of those who died. You know, we had a president whose name was Viktor. He's hiding now in the territory of the Russian Federation. And in his time, he put in prison Yulia Tymoshenko, the #1 in Batькivщина party, and she served her term. And at the moment, Viktor But,
по списку группы Юлии Тимошенко, сейчас сидит в тюрьме, в российской. Вот у меня вопрос.
And the #1 in Yulia Tymoshenko's party is at the moment serving his term in the Russian prison. Speaking about Savchenko, Sentsov, and at least 30 more Ukrainian war prisoners that are serving their terms in Russia, when will be they released? Let me start with your second question, and then I will definitely answer your first one as well. Speaking about Savchenko and when and on what terms she can be released. Our position on the issue is absolutely transparent. The colleagues of the journalists who died fulfilling their professional duty in the Ukraine are here today. And let me emphasize that the journalists who died here did not take part in any military actions. They were unarmed, and it is a responsibility of every state structure, including the military structures, is to provide for their health and security, and to give them a chance to fulfill their professional duty in order to disseminate the information, the reliable information. It is what is accepted everywhere in the world. It is a standard practice. But, however, those people were murdered, and according to our law enforcement agencies, it was Mrs. Savchenko who targeted them as targets. And if during the investigation we find out that she was not guilty, we will release her immediately. If we find out that she was guilty and she took part in the murder, then I believe that the Russian court will take the relevant decision and she will serve her sentence according to the decision of the court. At the same time, in advance, no one can claim that a person is guilty of committing any crime, especially keeping in mind that the presumption of innocence is in force in our country. So we will see what the investigation will discover. As for the other troops and other military men who you've mentioned, we do not believe that they are war prisoners. They are kept, they are serving their terms in prison, and there is a pre-trial on their cases. They are suspected of terrorist activities. This is my answer to the second part of your question. Now let us come back to the first question, speaking about who is responsible for what. In our country, in Russia, and frankly speaking, like in any other presidential republic, the president is held accountable for everything. And as for the troops, as for their destiny, the commander-in-chief is responsible for that. Let me draw your attention to the fact that in our country it is one and the same person. All the people who, by their own will, want to fulfill their duty or voluntarily take part into some military action, including the action in the east of the Ukraine, are not mercenaries, as they are not paid for those military actions. And in our public opinion, what is taking place in the east of the Ukraine is definitely a punitive operation, but it is organized by the Ukrainian authorities and not by anybody else. These were not the militia of the southeast who sent their military units to Kiev, but those were the Ukrainian army who moved their artillery system and their shelling system to the southeast of Ukraine. Let me explain what the problem is and how we can find a way out from the situation. The problem is that after the coup d'etat, and no matter what you say about it, it was definitely a coup d'etat that happened in Kiev. It was a forceful overthrow.
хоть какой-то политический диалог,
instead of
сначала
starting
начали
a political
применять
dialogue,
правоохранительные органы,
the
милицию.
new authorities
Когда это не
started to
получилось,
use
начали
the law
применять
enforcement
армию.
agencies first,
Когда и это не
and when it
получилось,
didn't work out, they sent the
сегодня
army.
пытаются решить
When
вопрос
it didn't
тоже
work
силовым
out
способом,
either,
с помощью
they
экономической
started to
блокады.
apply
Считаю, что этот путь
other
абсолютно
methods, for
бесперспективный,
example, the
вредный
economic
для
blockage
судеб государственности Украины и
and the
для
economic
украинского народа.
and the cutting off of the
Надеюсь,
economic
что нам
ties
удастся
with the
в ходе
southeast.
диалога,
I suppose
а мы
that it
готовы
is
выступать здесь как
unacceptable
посредники,
for the Ukrainian nation. We are
выйти
ready to
все-таки
participate in
на
the process
прямой именно политический
as
диалог
mediators
и этими
and intermediaries,
способами и
and
этими
we hope
политическими
that we'll be able
инструментами
to start
урегулировать ситуацию.
an inclusive
Вплоть до
political dialogue
восстановления
and to use
единого
diplomatic
политического
means
пространства.
to restore the united political space. Let us continue.
Верницкий, Первый канал. Дайте, пожалуйста.
Mr. Vernitsky, Channel 1, please. Anton
Происходящее
Vernitsky,
сейчас с
Channel
нашей
1.
экономикой — это расплата за Крым.
Mr. Putin,
Пора
what is
вот
going
честно
on
сказать.
in our economy? Maybe this
Нет.
is the price we have to pay for the
Это не
Crimea. Maybe it
расплата
is
за
time
Крым,
to say that,
это
frankly,
расплата
no, it is
за-
not the price that
это
we have to
плата,
pay for the
вернее,
Crimea.
за
This is
наше
how we have to
естественное
pay
желание
for our natural
самосохраниться как
will
нация, как цивилизация,
to
как
preserve
государство.
our nation, to maintain
И
our
вот почему.
state.
Я уже отвечая на вопрос вашего коллеги из НТВ,
And when I
сказал,
was
что
answering the question of
мы
your
после
colleague
крушения
from
Берлинской
NTV,
стены,
I
после
mentioned that after the
развала
Berlin
Советского
Wall fell
Союза,
and
абсолютно
the Soviet Union
посланник уже об
dissolved,
этом говорил, абсолютно
and I already
раскрыты
mentioned
нашим
that
партнерам.
in my address to the Federal
Что мы
Assembly,
увидели?
we were totally open to our
Прямую,
partners.
полную
But
поддержку
what we
терроризма
saw
на
was
Северном
that they
Кавказе.
directly
Напрямую,
supported
понимаете?
terrorists
Это что, партнеры
in
так
the
разве
Caucasus,
поступают?
in
Я
the
сейчас не
Northern
буду вдаваться в
Caucasus.
детали, но это факт.
I'm not going to go into
И все
details
это
at the
знают.
moment, but do partners act in such a way?
По любому
Everyone
вопросу,
is
вот
very
чего бы
well
мы ни делали,
aware of their actions.
всегда мы встречаем проблемы,
And no matter what we
оппонирования и
do,
борьбу с нами.
they're always
Ну,
against our actions.
давайте вспомним,
They're
как
always
страна
counteracting
готовилась
us.
к Олимпиаде 2014
If we recall
С каким
the
подъемом,
preparation process
энтузиазмом мы
for
это
the
делали. Для того,
Olympic
чтобы
Games,
устроить праздник не
remember
только
how
для наших
enthusiastic we
любителей спорта, но
were
и для
about
любителей
the
спорта во всем
Olympics.
мире.
We wanted to
Но
make a
это же
holiday
очевидный
not
факт.
only for
Были
athletes
предприняты
and sports
беспрецедентные
fans in our
попытки
country,
явно
but what we
скоординированные
saw
дискредитировать и
were the
подготовку к Олимпиаде
coordinated
и сам ход Олимпиады. Ну, это
efforts to
очевидный факт.
jeopardize the preparation
зачем?
process for the
Кому
Olympic
это
Games
надо?
and the Olympic
И
Games
так
themselves.
бесконечно.
I don't
Вот я,
know who wanted to do that and
я
why,
приводил,
but
знаете,
that is what we are witnessing all the
на
time.
Валдайском клубе, как
You
так
know,
называемом,
speaking
пример и
in
вспомнил
front of
наш
the Valdai
наиболее
Club,
узнаваемый символ медведя,
I
да,
quoted an
который
example,
там охраняет свою
and
территорию.
I mentioned the
Знаете, в чем
bear
дело? Если
who guards his
Если
forests.
продолжить такие аналогии,
You know, the thing is that
мне самому иногда
if
приходит
we
в
go
голову
on
мысль,
with
может
such
быть, Мишке нашему
analogies,
надо посидеть спокойненько, так? Не
sometimes
гонять поросят и подсвинок
And
по тайге,
this thing even comes to my mind
питаться
is that
ягодками,
probably
метком.
our bear should
Ну,
just
что покоя
relax
оставить,
and sit
не
quiet,
Потому
relax
что
and sit
будут
quietly
всегда
and just
стремиться
eat
к тому, чтобы
honey
посадить его на
instead of
цепь.
hunting animals.
А как только
Maybe
удастся посадить
then
на цепь,
they will leave the bear in peace.
вырвут и
But
зубы,
no, they
и
will
когти.
not. What they're trying to do is to chain the bear. And when they manage to chain the bear, they will
как только,
just
не дай бог, это произойдет, ну и Мишка не нужен.
take out
Так,
his
тайгу будут сразу
fangs
собирать. Ведь
and
уже
claws.
от почти официальных
This
лиц
is how
слышали
nuclear
многократно,
deterrence
что,
is working at the moment.
несправедливо, что
And
Сибирь принадлежит вся России
We could
с ее
even
богатствами.
hear that from officials saying that it is not just that Siberia belongs to Russia.
У Мексики
But how can they say that it is unjust?
Техас это справедливо.
If
За
they,
то,
for
что мы,
example, take taxes from
значит, на своей собственной
Mexico,
земле хозяйствуем,
it is
это
the right thing to
справедливо.
do.
Нужно раздать.
And
Значит,
if
а
we
потом,
manage
после
our
этого,
own
как только,
territories, then it
вырвут,
is unjust to
когти и
them.
зубы, значит, тогда Мишка вообще не
But
нужен.
it is ridiculous. And if they take out the bear's fangs and
Чучело из него сделают, и
claws,
всё.
the bear
Поэтому
will
дело
not
не
be
в
able to
Крыме.
do
Дело
anything.
в том, что мы защищаем свою самостоятельность, свой суверенитет и
It will
право
just
на
be a
существование.
stuffed
Вот
animal.
это мы должны
What
все
we are trying
понять.
to do at the
И
moment
если мы
is to
считаем,
maintain our
что
sovereignty.
одна из проблем, которые
And
сегодня
our
есть у нас, в том числе
independence.
в экономике, в результате
And
санкций,
if you believe that the problems we are facing in our economy at the
Она-
moment, the problems that
действенная, а это так и есть, из общего
Are the
объема проблем,
results
если
of
так
the
условно
sanctions.
взять, процентов 25,
And
наверное,
it is really
это
partially true, because you know
влияние
about 25% of the
25-30.
problems we are facing at the moment, 25 or
Но мы
30%,
должны это понять.
are
Мы
due to the
хотим
sanctions.
сохраниться и
But
бороться.
what we have to realize
Изменить,
is
кстати,
that if we
к
want to
лучшему,
maintain our sovereignty,
воспользовавшись этими
to
явлениями
fight
сегодня,
and to improve the
нашу
situation
структуру
in the
экономики,
country,
быть более
to benefit from the
независимыми,
current
пройти
events
через
in order
это.
to restructure our economy,
Или мы
to
хотим,
go
чтобы нашу
through
шкуру
all the
повесили
difficulties
там
and to improve. If we want to to do that. We have to further work. Do we want to achieve that, or do we want our bear to become just a stuffed animal? This is our choice, and it has nothing to do with the Crimea.
VGTRK, the Russia channel, is responsible for our broadcast today, so let's give the floor to this journalist. Good afternoon, my name is Evgeny Roshkov, Rossiya-1 and Vesti. Well, it's quite understandable as far as Crimea is concerned. The question is how much money we will have to put into its development after the difficult Ukrainian past. I'd like to ask you one of the most sensitive questions. What is going on in the eastern part of Ukraine? What is going on in the part of Ukraine which is now called Nova Russia? That's what they call themselves. How do you view the future of this part of Ukraine? Do you believe that the Minsk arrangements are going to succeed? And how are you going to help Donbass? Just like you are doing right now with humanitarian convoys, or in another manner? I think I partially answered your question when I answered the question your Ukrainian colleague asked. We believe that crisis will have to be resolved sooner or later, and the sooner the better. That's the first thing. Secondly, it has to be resolved with political means, not just with pressure, be that economic pressure in the form of an economic blockade or the use of armed forces. In any way, we're going to help people just as we're doing right now. As you're aware, the 10th humanitarian convoy has been dispatched already. But we have to base our actions upon the fundamental principles of international law. And one of those principles is that the people have to determine their future themselves. When I talked about the political means for resolving this issue, these were not just empty words. We have to restore the political space. What form this space will take is difficult to say right now, but that's what we have to seek right now. Both sides, and that's the problem, have to strive to achieve that. And those who live in the eastern part of Ukraine have to be respected. Economic ties have to be restored and reestablished. As this was known, a major part of the Ukrainian energy system is based on the coal from Donbass. We were asked to put pressure on the southeast part of Ukraine, on Donbass, to make miners provide coal to the rest of Ukraine. But this coal is not bought because all banks have been shut down and there is no way to settle the payment. Just the day before yesterday, they told us that they were ready to pay. And they even said that they paid for it in advance, but the banking cards are not working. And it's the same with all the other questions. But I do not see any other way but the peaceful settlement of this crisis. As far as the Minsk arrangements are concerned, that's very important. We advocate their implementation. I was one of those who initiated the meeting in Minsk, together with Petro Poroshenko. Without a doubt, the President of Ukraine wants to achieve a resolution of this crisis. I do not have any doubts about his desire to do that, but he is not the only person there, unfortunately. We have heard dignitaries say that they have to wage the war until the end, that it can even lead to a continental crisis. We hear many statements from hawks, but President Poroshenko wants a peaceful settlement. Of course, the Minsk arrangements have to be put into place. I was one of those who initiated those arrangements. I'd like to say something to you. Our representatives in Minsk signed the memorandum back in September. But apart from the memorandum, there were protocols which established the disengagement line. Representatives from Donetsk did not sign those protocols. That's the problem. From the outset, they told us that they could not do it. When we tried to insist, let me be frank, quite open about that, these things have to be known to the audience, to the public. They responded to us that they could not leave those contested villages because their families, their wives, their brothers and sisters were living there. They didn't want them to get raped or killed. That was the greatest challenge. But unfortunately, the Ukrainian authorities didn't withdraw their troops from the points they have to leave, say the airport of Donetsk. They're still occupying those areas. Are you aware of the recent developments? The militia took those armed forces to banyas, they provided them with food, they even let them maintain a rotation mechanism. Well, you can laugh at it, but I believe that hostages, prisoners of war should be exchanged right now. But the life is too complicated when lists are provided. The Ukrainian authorities have those who have been detained in Khersonesus or in Odessa, those who didn't participate in hostilities. I believe that these lists have to be adjusted so that people could find themselves at home before Christmas, before the New Year. Yesterday there was an agreement to have an exchange of 30 people. Representatives from the militia came to the agreed-upon spot, but the representative of the official authorities said that they decided to delay the exchange. Well, I think this could have been resolved, but those are details. Anyway, I think that there should be positive dynamics in implementing the Minsk arrangements. Today or tomorrow, a video conference should take place between the militia and the authorities. The next step is going to be taken during a meeting in Minsk. But what's important is for the Kyiv authorities to keep their promises as well. They agreed to have an amnesty law, but this law has not been adopted yet. They are always telling us that they have adopted a special status law, but this law could not have been put into practice because it just could not enter into force. It could have entered into force only after an act on the disengagement line had been passed, but it was not passed. That's the problem. We have to understand one thing. If Ukraine is to preserve its territorial integrity and to restore its calm, they have to respect everyone who lives in the territory of their country, and to that end they have to stop putting pressure. I do believe that this is the path they're going to say. I was remiss to forgot about Itatas. Romanenko, please. Thank you, Veronika Romanenko, Itatas. This year we came to understand that the energy diplomacy has been turned into one of the key factors of geopolitics. How justified is the turn eastwards of Russia, the contracts with Turkey, with China? Have you calculated all the hidden difficulties? There are many who still think that the China contract is not profitable and the Turkey contract is going to make Russia dependent. Are you going to make some objections? Oh no, I have nothing to object to because it's just, not justified. Just have a look at what is being written in our country or in the West. There are many talks about the U.S. turning eastward. Is it tied to the geopolitics or not? The thing is, the Asia-Pacific region is developing quickly. even more quickly than the rest of the world. New opportunities arise for Japan, for South Korea, China, India. Their demand for energy is growing and quicker than in other regions of the world. So what do we have to do? Do we have to refuse to provide them with energy resources? No. What we're doing now is what we planned a long time ago. This is not tied to any problems in our economy. This is just putting into practice what we planned for in advance. As far as our contract with China is concerned, this is not profitable. Both sides decided to provide each other preferences. It was a conscious decision. Preferences were provided both by China. I'm not going to elaborate on that right now. Nothing strange about that. The government of Russia and the government of China both decided to provide preferences to the other counterpart. And this project is indubitably a profitable one. We agreed on the price formula, which is not that different from the formula which we employ with regard to Europe. Regarding the coefficient, well, of course, the coefficient is somewhat different because this is a different region of the world. But anyway, this contract is going to allow Russia to concentrate great resources and not just to create a gas pipeline. It will help us provide the Russian Far East with gas, and it will allow us to link the western gas pipelines and the eastern pipelines and redistribute gas flows from one part of the country to the other when it is profitable, when it is beneficial from the economic point of view. Had it been not for this, then we would not have been able to get down to providing gas to Siberia and the Russian Far East. Let alone, this is a great construction site. It will help resuscitate the economy of this part of Russia. Now, regarding Turkey, the Turkish economy is growing as well, just as the Asia-Pacific region. It needs new energy resources. We created the so-called Blue Stream several years ago, and now our Turkish counterparts are asking whether we can increase supplies to the domestic market of Turkey. Why would we refuse them? We have all the arrangements in place, we have all the pricing formulas, everything regarding the schedule of supplies. We have a fairly good understanding of their demands and requests are. We know what they need, and that's why we're going to do that. Now, whether a European hub can be created on the borders of Turkey and Greece, this is not up to us. It is up to our European partners. If they want to have a reliable and safeguarded source of supplies of energy resources from Russia, which they're in dire need of, without any transit risks, then it's wonderful. We're going to work together. We're going to cooperate. We will use Greece as a transit country to link the system to Macedonia, to Serbia. We can get back to Baumgarten in Austria once again. If they don't want that, well, then let it be so. The thing is, there are no supplies of gas that would be cheaper than those from Russia. Well, not in the near future, at least. RIA Novosti. Grigory Dubovitsky, please. Grigory Dubovitsky, RIA Novosti. Mr. President, let me get back to the situation in the currency market. The thing is, the developments are quite rapid. It's a source of concern for millions of Russians. Many experts, and even you, said that one of the reasons for such a situation is the people who speculate on the currency market. Who are those people? Can you name them? Are those Russians or foreigners? Why cannot we overcome them? Are they that strong or are we that weak? And the second question, as a follow-up, is the central bank or the government planning such actions as the fixation of the Russian ruble rate or interventions or denomination. The thing is, there can be measures devised. Those who get money from exports will simply come and sell their currency. As far as I know, the central bank or the government are not planning to place limits upon our exporters. And that is the right thing to do. This doesn't mean that the government cannot work through their representatives in the board of directors. Our largest energy companies, as you're aware, have some shares that are possessed by the government, but there are no decrees planned to introduce artificial limitations. As far as speculators are concerned, those who speculate in the currency markets, it's a notion from the penal code. Those can be foreigners, all kinds of funds that are present on the Russian markets. They're quite active. Those can be our companies even. From the outset, I have said that this is quite consistent with the practices of any market economy. Such people or companies or organizations emerge in any market economy. They work in the market, creating a conducive environment. They push institutions such as the central bank to get into market and to sell their currency and gold reserves, to perform the so-called interventions. The central bank has ceased to make those interventions. Probably they should have done it earlier, then they would not have had to change the repo rate or perform those large-scale interventions. Well, that's another question. I have just told you what these people are. Several days ago, I even talked to some of those. I had a telephone conversation, a friendly one. I asked them why they're doing it. They told us that they would soon have to pay their credits. All right, I said, but if you search your stocks, what will you do? He thought and has said that he had 3 billion in stocks. It was just one company, so they had 3 billion in reserves. And you take 1, 2, 3 companies, then probably not 3, but 300 billion will be found. Certainly, we do not have to force these companies to do that. We have to maintain the stability of our companies. And to that end, the government should keep in close touch with these companies. And together with the central bank, they should provide these companies not just with currency, but also with ruble liquidity. Moskovsky Komsomolets, please. Good afternoon, Mr. President. Victoria Prihodko, Moskovsky Komsomolets. In a number of Russian regions, primarily in Moscow, the number of beds for the patients in hospitals is decreasing, and the number of medical staff is decreasing as well. What is your attitude towards that? Is this experiment going to be conducted in the rest of the country? Well, as you can see, people are concerned that due to this reform, they will not get the medical help that is guaranteed to them by the Constitution. You know, you have touched upon one of the key issues of our contemporary life. It is one of the fundamentals of our life. The healthcare and education of citizens, these are the issues that should always be in the spotlight of the government and the regional authorities and the spotlight of the Moscow authorities. Certainly, we have to see this, we have to react very actively to what is happening in the expert community.
And all the changes planned and that are already underway should be done in contact with the representatives, in this case, of the medics. And if Moscow government has been lacking in this part of work, of course this should be adjusted. But first of all, we should focus in dealing with the matters of education and healthcare. We should focus on people that benefit from that. Millions of people expect from us to ameliorate the situation in healthcare system. We should be focused on that. We should be focused on our citizens. What do they say? They are not exactly happy with it. We should analyze why that is the case and what we have to do to make the situation better. I'm not going to go into details with the actions of Moscow government. They were in their competence, but we have to take note that we spend a lot on healthcare, but it's not very efficient. We provide beds not to make the patient feel better, but to increase their health. We should work on high-tech component of medical system. For example, 4 or 5 days, a person may stay in a hospital with intensive care, and then he or she receives treatment other way. Moreover, Moscow government believes they believe that there have been 30% more beds in Moscow medical systems than it is needed. And that is a very important matter because we have to pay for land, because we have to pay for electricity. So we have expenses that are not very efficient, and we could allocate that money to the quality of our medical system. We could allocate that money to training our medical personnel, to better equipment of our hospitals. I'm talking about my own opinion, not the actions of the Moscow government, but the recent actions of the Moscow government. I believe that was in the right direction. The steps were taken in the right direction. They established contact with the medical workers. They made a decision on additional compensations for the medical specialists whose posts would be reduced. That would be more than about 500,000 rubles. The medical personnel of medium level 300,000 and lower level 200,000. Moreover, there have been programs on retraining of specialists from 3 months to up to 2 years. And of course, the city government has to decide who, where and how will work further. But that cannot be done with no contact with medical workers. But the actions should be careful. They should not forget that the main principle of not only the medical workers, but all those who work in healthcare do not do harm. Let us continue. Gazeta.ru, please. For a lot of years, you have been in Kremlin Pool. Good afternoon, Vladimir Vladimirovich. Gazeta.ru. In your message to the Federal Assembly, you said some national traitors of fifth column. You do not call names, but with your words, the fifth column entered the political lexicon, and your supporters have been naming the fifth column those who do not agree with the authorities. And who did you mean? Speaking of national traitors and fifth column, what is the definition of that society? I don't think I am responsible in that regard, and all my actions were aimed at consolidating our society, not dividing it. And if you believe that that was the case, I should... Apparently, I believe that that was the case. You are more perceptive in that regard. Maybe I should be more careful in my public statements, but one cannot be too careful in naming things. We sometimes have to name matters for what they are. Frankly speaking, it's very difficult to answer that question because it is a fine line. It's difficult to define where the opposition ends and the fifth column starts. This year was the year of culture, and we celebrated the anniversary of Mikhail Lermontov, one of our genius poets. We all remember his verses. We remember his poem on Borodino, "Let Us Die Near Moscow," but he wrote other verses, "Goodbye, the unwashed Russia, and you, the blue uniforms and people who are devoted to them." Of course, he was in opposition, and a lot of you know that when he wrote to the death of a poet, that was referred to the killing of Alexander Sergeyevich Pushkin, and one of his relatives went to visit him and saw that poem. He asked him to be a little less harsh in his wordings. He was so surprised and he was indignant, and he made harsher wordings. Of course, he was in opposition to the government, but I believe that he was indeed a patriot. It is a very fine line, because he was an officer in the army. He was a very brave and valiant officer. He went into combat for the interests of the country. By the way, in the recent film by Nikita Mikhalkov, the officers that were just like that when they accomplished their mission in leading to the revolution, the revolutionaries. It was the revolutionaries that acted to their detriment. That was the beginning. But the difference between the members of opposition and the fifth column, it is very difficult to perceive from an outside. An opposition may be very rigid. Of course, the member of opposition has to fight for the interests of his or her land, but the fifth column only act on the interests of another state, and they are just tools in achieving those political aims that are alien to us. Sorry, Mr. Peskov, the gifted children, please. Good afternoon. The Gumo Institute political card, we have been implementing the project Gifted Children. We have created an internet site to seek for gifted children throughout Russia. It helps to foster patriotism in children and increasing their professional skills. Of course, that's not commercial but social project. It is implemented by the young, for the young. I wonder if there will be state support for for those projects. And you personally, Mr. Putin, are you ready to support our incentive? We really hope for your help and support. Thank you in advance for your answer, and we would like to invite you to us. Sorry, and what are your supposed steps exactly, please? Right now, the internet site Gifted Children is working. From February it will be in the open access. That will be a site to communicate on professional interests. So young people will be communicating on 25 nominations. They will choose what they are interested in, what they like. They communicate, they share experience, they find out about new possibilities. Oh, yeah, I see. Thank you. Of course, it's a very right thing to do, and it's important. Please be seated. And I would like to wish you every success in your endeavor. Of course, we'll try to support the projects of such dimension, and of course I will ask my colleagues to help you in every way you need, but I believe that there will be special funds for gifted children for the whole period of their education, so the government will pay additional funds for them, additional scholarships. As for another possibilities to take part, that will be, I should say that after the Sochi Olympics, I initiated a project for creating in the lower cluster in Imeretin Valley a constant center for training school children on our winter sports, and that project has already been started. And the Minister of Sports is listening, and I hope he doesn't faint because he doesn't know it yet. I would like to make small changes to that project. I believe that right at the Black Sea, there should be, this project should not be just government project, and the children that are gathered there from all over the country, from sports schools, and there should be two more parts. Children should go there from physics and mathematics schools and from music schools, and that children's center should be threefold: sport, music and mathematics. I hope that we, in implementing that project in sports, there are 200 children there now. For 21 days, 200 children from all over the country, and that should be the case for music and for physics and mathematics. That would help specialists that work there to choose the most gifted, to take note of them, to work with them, to help them on the next step, to find their calling in the institutions of higher education. So we, together with you, will move in that direction. Thank you very much. Mr. President, if you allow, let Life News ask the question. Good afternoon, Mr. President. A year ago, you gave pardon to Mikhail Khodorkovsky. He promised not to take part in politics, but just recently he stated that he wants to be president. And where? The president of what country would he be? So, do you think he's a patriot? He is just here a opposition member or a patriot? So, it's one or two questions, three actually. And what will the others do when we discuss until the morning? Yes, really, Mr. Khodorkovsky asked for pardon, and he sent such a document, and he was not going to take part in politics. But when I made a decision on, I didn't take into account what he will do, on what he will or will not do. That choice is up to him. And that is his right choice as any citizen of Russian Federation. As for criteria, he meets those criteria he doesn't meet, if he meets those criteria to be elected, well, he's welcome to it, but I had other concerns. He said that his mother was very sick, and mother, it's a very serious matter. He had been for some time in prison. And why would we keep him there if he didn't have the possibility to say to bid farewell to his mother? And I still believe that it was the right thing to do. And now let us go to this part, the representative of the first channel. Mr. President, a question on the Olympics, on sport and on politics. One of the most bright events of this year was the Russian Olympics, the way it was prepared and carried out, and taking into account this project, could we hope for a multiplication effect in economy, because we have built great infrastructure, we have invested a lot of money, and the country has shown that it is capable of implementing such great projects. Do you think that Russia failed in benefiting from the fruit of the Olympics due to the tragedy in Ukraine? And another question, follow-up question, we are going to, in 2018, we are going to host a Football World Cup. It's a very costly affair, and we have a lot of money to spend, taking into account sanctions and the decrease in oil prices and the currency levels. Do you think that Russia is capable of carrying out that project? First, as for the Olympics, I believe everything that we wanted, everything that we meant to achieve in preparing for the Olympics and carrying it out, we have been successful in that endeavor. And of course, we have won the Olympics, and we are thankful to our athletes and Paralympic athletes, because they are the true heroes of that event. As for the situation in Ukraine, of course, the Olympics ended in the circumstances, those tragic circumstances, but it was not us who pulled off that coup d'etat. That didn't depend on us. We wish that didn't happen, but that's what happened. As for if we are happy about the Olympics, the results, of course we are. At the use of Olympic objects is we are witnessing the use of Olympic objects. In other countries, there have been those objects have been abandoned, but right now we have held Formula 1 races and chess world tournament, and everything is booked from the end of December and up until February. And I'm sure that until the end of the skiing season, everything is booked, and there will be no places to spend. And of course, we as citizens of Russia have a new all-year center, recreation center, both winter and summer. And of course, we are going to host sporting events in winter sports. And answering the question of your colleague, we are going to work on children's sports there. There is a hockey team in Sochi. Of course, they are a young team. They are losing some matches, but they are, of course, are winning. And they used to say, we don't need a hockey team. No one will visit that. There is no culture. But everything there was not a single spare place there. And of course, sports fans should we should thank sport fans when they visit with their wives and children and their relatives. They visit that just as in holidays. It's all developing, and it will keep on developing. As for the World Cup, of course, that's a costly event, but unlike other countries that refuse to host such events, we there they have more people that work in sports and physical education, but we do not have adequate physical education culture. And if we don't,
and if we want to live longer, if we want to be healthy, then we must have the sports infrastructure. We have to have an opportunity to go skating, to play football, to play hockey. We need new gyms. We need our people to spend their money not on drinking vodka with friends, but to go and exercise, even if it is a paid thing. You must create the culture of physical education and physical culture. Then we'll have a life expectancy not of 70 or 71 years as it is now, but longer. And so we will have to have these competitions such as the World Cup, because we'll have a sharp increase in the number of children which will be playing football. And of course this infrastructure will not only be in Sochi, it will be developing in more than 10 cities of the Russian Federation. And also the transport infrastructure and healthcare system will be developed alongside with that, just as it happened before the Olympics in the Sochi. So it is just an additional pretext to develop Russia itself. And we have to spend money for that. We are continuing the Dozhd channel. The Dozhd channel, Ksenia Sobchak. I have two questions to you, if you allow. First, everyone is concerned with the events in Ukraine, but there are some other events in the Chechen Republic. Ramzan Kadyrov, the head of the Chechen Republic, de facto announced that the Russian federal laws are not functioning on the territory of the Chechen Republic, and that the constitution of Russia does not function there. He publicly said that there will be some massacres over the relatives of the people who are accused of terrorism without any court decisions. And so I'd like to have a comment from you as a lawyer and as a guarantor of the Constitution. Will you protect the citizens who now fall under the pre-court massacre? Their houses are being burnt, and the only human rights protection organization which exists in Chechnya has searches in it, and there have been a burning. Why did you give a floor to her? Sorry, that's my fault. Well, Ksenia, one question, just one question by one question. Let us respect everyone. Well, no. If you gave her the floor, come on, Ksenia, the second question. Second question, I'd like to clarify for myself and our audience this fine line between the fifth column and the opposition. When you quoted Lermontov, it was quite clear, but how about the people who live now? Some time ago, you announced publicly that the mass media massacred my father earlier, and I believe that massacre term has returned to our life. I'm not speaking only about the mass media massacre of Makarevich, of some movies about some invented junta's friends. I know those people who those movies were talking about, and I know them as patriots. There are some slogans like Bandera's allies, which are going on the federal channels. And I'd like to say that currently the federal channels are instigating hatred within the Russian society. For example, the feature about the crucified boy shown on the first channel, where the state could have blocked that. This feature was published, and it has been proved that it is a lie, but no one has actually asked to forgive him for this lie. So, are you not afraid of this hatred growing in mass media, and what you will be doing to lower this degree of hatred? Do you still believe that the people are divided into your competitors and banderlogs? Well, banderlogs do exist. Kipling said that, not me. But if we go to the essence of your questions, the first question of yours about the words of Mr. Kadyrov, about the relatives of terrorists, and about their housing, their expelling from the Republic, etc., etc. You know, and here I can't have any other approach except one. Everyone in Russia must obey or abide by the existing laws. No one could be named guilty until the court verifies that. Second, that was the first thing. Second, I told you that life is more versatile and more difficult than that. And I have to say, from the practice of the anti-terrorist division's work, as usual, well, not always, I will clarify later, but as usual, the relatives of the terrorist attackers know about that at least. That is the overwhelming majority of cases, but still, that does not give anyone the right, including the head of the Chechnya, to make some pre-court massacre. I agree with you completely on that thing. More to it, the law enforcement bodies are now making a check and investigation on this case. Who those people who burned the houses were, it needs to be understood, because these people were wearing masks. And the words of Mr. Kadyrov might have been just emotional, but some people could have used his emotions. I believe that the emotions themselves could be understandable, because 14 policemen were killed during the terrorist attack, and it all began with killing the road service police. Not in a combat, but people were just shot directly at them. And some more people died later, and 38 people have been heavily wounded, and thousands of people, have went to the streets in a meeting, political meeting, and you know that there have only after that there have been some emotional statements from the head of the Republic, which I believe covered the expectations of the people, but of course he did not have a right to do so, and it would be quite correct to check all the facts. And I repeat, besides the public statements and actions, there must be an investigation which would show what has really happened. Maybe someone has just used the words of the head of the Republic, or maybe not. And in that case, the law enforcement bodies would have to respond to the situation. But still, fortunately or unfortunately, you know which methods to fight with terror are actually used in the world, for example, in Israel. But Israel is not the case even. Now we have become witnesses of what has happened in the United States after the 11th of September. Tortures were legalized. How could you explain that? Moreover, they have not only been legalized, a methods of torture has been developed. So, life is quite versatile, but we have to follow the law, in which I agree with you. And if we go beyond the law, that would lead us to chaos. And we will, of course, investigate the facts and respond to them. Now, To your second question, different campaigns on massacre in the mass media, etc. I just know, and I have learned that when I came to Moscow, I had some thoughts that a mass media massacre was organized against your father, but when I came to Moscow I found the confirmation to that. It seemed to me very strange even then that after Mr. Sobchak bought a flat in 100 square meters, 2 legal cases have been initiated against him in a week's time. And then during the election campaign, the very fact of this has been printed on leaflets, and the leaflets were thrown away from the planes in St. Petersburg. Of course, that was an organized campaign, and it was organized by certain representatives of the authorities in the fighting with him. I'd like to assure you that there has been no special organization of any campaign towards the people who do not agree with our actions in the Crimea, in Ukraine, etc. None of the official powers or representatives of the bodies of powers have been doing this, neither. If there is some social response from the people who do not agree with the position, then the people who faced this disagreement must understand that they have not monopolized the power to oppose, and that there are people who do not agree with their ideas, and those people will be opposition to them. And you must just respond adequately to that. You mustn't just shout on every corner that everyone is harassing me, etc. But you must just have the discussion publicly. As far as the official authorities are concerned, I repeat again, there has been no attempts or orders or decrees to organize any campaigns. There have never been so, and there will never be. By the way, our European partners act quite differently. For example, to Mr. Gazmanov, to Valeria, to Mr. Kobzon, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Latvia forbid them to enter the territory of the Republic of Latvia. That is the position of the authorities. Russian authorities have never had any such position and will never have one. You're welcome. Dmitry, just a moment. Let you ask the question. Good afternoon, Mr. President. Alexei Nishuk, Reuters. For the last year, Russia has been involved in one of the deepest crises in its newest history. It all began in Ukraine at the end of the last year. It then continued with the worsening of relations with the West, almost up to the level of the Cold War. Now there is a deep currency crisis, which might be grown to financial and economic crisis. There are such risks. Of course, often some external powers are blamed. But I know that some representatives of the elites, the people from your circles, the most informed citizens of Russia, even despite their public rhetorics, often tend to blame you, in some cases, as a person who has been taking all the key decisions in Russia. Could you tell me their names and surnames, please? No, they are blaming you anonymously. But there are some hints at that in their talks with the journalists, and this brings me to my question. How sure are you of your circle that you will have its loyal support always, and how large are the risks of a coup d'etat in Russia, maybe? What would you do in the case of Orange or, God save us, Red Revolution? Okay, you've named it, but have you any plans in order to avoid the coup d'etat from inside? Well, do not be afraid. We can't have this palace overthrow because we have no palaces. We have the Kremlin as the official residence. It's well guarded, and this factor is a factor of our state stability. But that stability itself is based on other things. It can't be based on anything but support of the Russian people. And I believe you wouldn't argue with me in the fact that the main direction of our foreign and domestic policy receives such support from the Russian people. Because people feel with their hearts and souls that me and we are acting in the interest of the overwhelming majority of the citizens of the Russian Federation. Now, about who is to blame, etc., in the Ukraine and in some other events, in the cataclysms of the present day. You know my position. I have said for many times that there has been a coup d'etat and that it was a mistake. The Eastern Europe, our neighbors, including Ukraine, are not some banana republics, are not Northern Africa even, and not Somalia, where you could just use some special means or militants or people who are maybe not even satisfied with the policy of their authorities and they do a coup d'etat. You say that I just accuse someone of something. I don't. I just state the fact. I'll inform you on the discussion with my partners in this regard without going deep into details. You know that there is an agreement between an opposition and the authorities of Ukraine of the 21st of February. It was signed. 3 ministers of foreign affairs were put forth as the guarantors of this agreement. These were Germany, Poland and France. We had conversations with the heads of the United States and they told us, let Yanukovych not use force. Let him not use force. He didn't. What is the result? The coup d'etat. And they say us, what could we do? The situation went out of control. In the penal right it's called the excess of a performer, but if it is the excess of the performer or executor, what could you tell if you couldn't stop the radicals who just broke into the administration of the president and took the governmental buildings? You should have told them, you know, guys, we want to see you in Europe, we want you to sign and ratify the association agreement, you are a part of the European family, but this is not the way to do this, and you will never be accepted in Europe if you act in such a way. And you must return to the agreement of the 21st February. You must form the national unity government and work together. And I believe that if our partners would have took such position, there would be no civil war in Ukraine now. But our colleagues went to another position. From the just cookies on the Maidan, they went to some promises, political and economic. By the way, someone has to pay something to Ukraine. No one actually gives any money to it, only through international financial institutions. And I believe our position was really consecutive, objective, and careful. Now, as far as the elites are concerned, you know, there's an elite wine, there are elite resorts, but there are no elite people. You know what the Russian elite are? That's a peasant, that's a hard worker who bears all the country on its shoulders. For centuries, that is the elite of Russian people, the peasants, an ordinary worker, that is the elite. And all the other division on elites is not grounded. There are rich people and there are poor people, there are sick people and there are healthy people, but they are all equal before the law and before the country. There are rich people who are set in a patriotic way. And you say, is it possible that someone are not glad? Of course. What should they be glad about? Of course they are not content. But the question is, how do they think of finding the solution to the situation? Whether they want to be always independence on a hook. There is a situation when one of our Russian companies registered in offshore took a decision of the dividends. That's a legal company, that's a legal decision. It's a large company working in offshore. They took the decision on dividends. What happened next? there are some of the sanctioned people there, and they have been told that the local directors, they said, no, we can't transfer the money for the dividends to you. We must have consultations. They say, with whom? You must do that. You have to do that according to the law. Yes, we have to, but we will not. They say, but we'll go to court. We'll sue you for that. What have they done? Those people who said that they can't transfer the money, they just resigned. That's it. And without their signature, the money could not be transferred. And that's it. And after that, no one could fill the vacancies because there was an order not to fill them, and the money cannot be transferred. That's the situation. Do the representatives of the Russian business want to live in such a way? Most of them not. The main defender of the Russian citizens' interests, no matter what they do, including business, can be only the strong Russian state.
There's a question from Business FM, please. Let us give them the floor. Good day, my name is Mikhail Bazhanov, Business FM. Mr. Putin, your annual address to the Federal Assembly, you mentioned that there would be an amnesty of capital in Russia. There's been a week since then, but you have not heard any details so far. What we'd like to know is when it is going to start, how long it will last, and what will be the total of the capital that you're planning to bring back to the country. And what matters most is that what the mechanism of the amnesty is going to be like. Is the whole capital going to be brought back into the country, or the capital that was gained illegitimately is not going to go back? And will there be any filters for illegally gained incomes? And what do you think will be the reaction of the businesses to those laws? What will be the guarantees for the businesses? How can they be sure that after they register their business in Russia, they will not be persecuted by law enforcement agencies? Well, first, how much capital we are planning to bring back? We are not planning to do anything. It is not a fiscal measure. What we are talking about is legalizing the capital. And if businesses want to keep their property and money abroad, let them do so. The question is that they can declare their capital here and register it. This is the most important thing. The second thing is that I personally will monitor the mechanism implementation and will make sure that there will be no violations of the mechanism and of the guarantees. And let me warn my colleagues from the law enforcement agencies. We are going to apply very strict measures to all those who will violate the principle that I've just mentioned. And speaking about the filters and the criteria, I suppose there should be no criteria and no filters. All those who want to legalize their businesses in Russia and register here have to have a right like that. Speaking about the principle itself, there is innocence presumption in force in Russia, and there is nothing that contradicts it, then anything else is considered to be legal. And speaking about the mechanisms themselves, they have not been enforced yet, and the government is developing them at the moment. I believe that we should not only enable the legalization of the property that is in offshore zones, but also enable legalization of the property that has been hidden within Russia, that is declared as owned by the family. We have to declare once and forever what are the assets of the people. And to proceed. Arctic is a very interesting issue. Please, the floor is yours. My name is Yves Stoller. I am here to present the Arctic Channel 1 and the Yamal region. Our people would like to convey their greetings to you, and I have a question regarding our region. The citizens of the north are worried with the fact that there would be no elections of the governors of Yugra and Yamal. They are worried with the possibility of uniting the three regions and making a large one out of three of them. You've visited our region several times, and you know under which conditions we operate, and you probably realize that we would not like that to happen. What is your position? Could you please ensure us that there would be no just one regional entity from Kazakhstan to the Arctic? As for the borders and uniting the three regional entities of the Russian Federation, there's a relevant federal law, and there is no other way except for uniting the districts. There is no other way to unite the districts into one beside the will of people openly expressed. We are supposed to either organize a referendum or rather referendums at every regional entity. No one is going to impose anything. We believe it is counterproductive. At the same time, and everyone present here is very well aware of that, the productive facilities are distributed across Russia in an imbalanced way, and regional entities of the Russian Federation demonstrate significant imbalances. I mean the budget revenues of the regional entities. And in this regard, the life levels of people are also different. The level of the healthcare and education also differ from one regional district to another. And this is what we have to address. It is a very sensitive issue. It is particularly sensitive if it is relevant to some ethnic republics. And I suppose that only people based on their own life experience and based on their understanding of what is going on in the economy and in the social area can take the relevant decisions. I suppose there are some political forces who want to unite the regional entities and those who are against it. But what they have to do is to do that publicly, and the public should be informed and engaged into the process. We are not going to impose anything on you. Vladimir Vladimirovich, maybe we'd like to give the floor to BBC. It has not asked anything yet.
Mr. President, John Simpson.
Господин президент, меня зовут Джон Симпсон, я представляю BBC. Let me put on the headphones in order to understand your question correctly.
Специально так сделал. Ничего не работает.
Okay.
It is not working yet. You see what's going on. You know, my office always make themselves indispensable. That's what they're doing.
Mr. President, John Simpson from the BBC. Western countries almost universally now believe that there's a new Cold War and that you, frankly, have decided to create that. We see almost daily Russian aircraft taking sometimes quite dangerous maneuvers towards Western airspace. That must be done on your orders. You're the commander-in-chief. It must have been your orders that sent Russian troops into the territory of a sovereign country. Crimea first, and then whatever it is that's going on in eastern Ukraine. Now you've got a big problem with the currency of Russia. And you're going to need help and support and understanding from outside countries, particularly from the West. So can I say to you, can I ask you now, would you care to take this opportunity to say to people from the West that you have no desire to carry on with a new Cold War and that you will do whatever you can to sort out the problems in Ukraine? Thank you.
Thanks a lot for your question. As for our exercises and maneuvers, as well as the development of our military forces, you've stated that Russia, to a certain extent, contributed to the tension that we are witnessing in the world. Of course, Russia has contributed to the tension, but only in a sense. The only thing we've done is that we've been protecting our interests in a tougher way. We are not aggressive. We are not attacking anyone in the political sense of the word. We are not encroaching upon anyone's interests. We are just protecting our own. And the miscontent of our American partners is due to what we are doing. And it is not due to what we do in some security areas. It is not due to the maneuvers that could provoke tensions, for example. Let me explain what I mean. You've mentioned the flights of our aviation, including our strategic aviation flights. Do you know that Russia, at the beginning of the 90s, totally stopped the flights of our strategic aviation in the far patrolling regions? We totally stopped them, to the contrary of what the Soviet Union had done. But the American strategic aircraft with nuclear weapons on board continued their flights. Why did they do so? Whom were they threatening? So we did not fly. We stick to that practice. But maybe only 2 or 3 years ago we renewed the flights. We resumed the flying practice. So who provoked the tension? Was it us? I don't think so. We only have 2 military bases abroad in Kyrgyzstan because it is a strategically dangerous direction. We organized a base in Kyrgyzstan upon the request of Mr. Akayev, who was the president back then, because the terrorists entered the country. And we also have a military base in Tajikistan, at the border with Afghanistan. But I suppose you must be interested in preserving our bases there. And American bases are all over the world. And what you are trying to say is that we are being aggressive. But we should speak based on the common sense. And what about the Americans? What are they doing? What about the tactical nuclear weapons, for example? The budget of our Ministry of Defense for the next year has grown. And at the moment, it is about $50 billion in total. And the Pentagon's budget is 10 times higher. I think the Congress recently adopted the budget of $575 billion. And you are trying to say that we are pursuing an aggressive policy. Does it sound logical or reasonable to you? Is that us who move our military forces to the borders of other countries? Is that us who move our military structures and NATO's infrastructure closer to other countries? Does anyone listen to us at all? Is anyone engaged in the dialogue with us? No. What we hear is just mind your own business. Every country has the right to choose the ways to ensure its security. But why are we not allowed to do that then? We are supposed to have that right too. I already mentioned that in my address to the Federal Assembly, speaking about the ABM Treaty. Who resigned unilaterally from the treaty that was one of the cornerstones of the whole security system in the continent? Who withdrew from the anti-ballistic missile treaty? The United States did so. And they create new threats for us. They are deploying their strategic ABM systems not only in Alaska, but also in Europe, in Romania and Poland, straight next to our borders. And we are trying to say that we are pursuing an aggressive policy? The question is whether we want to maintain relations based on equal rights. Yes, we want to build relations based on equal rights, but with due respect of our interests in economic and political area. We've been maintaining negotiations on the WTO for many years now, for 19 years, and we believed that the agreements we reached were supposed to be solid. I'm not speaking about who is guilty and who is not. I believe that we are right in the course of the Ukrainian crisis. We believe that we are right and our Western partners are wrong. But we joined the WTO, and there are WTO rules. In violation of all those rules and in violation of the UN Charter, there have been sanctions introduced against Russia in an absolutely illegitimate and illegal way. Is the task who is wrong again? The only thing we want is to develop relations based on equal rights in security and economy. We would like to work together in nuclear weapons non-proliferation. We want to work together to counteract terrorism, transnational crime, organized crime, the spread of communicable diseases, including the disease caused by Ebola virus. We will work together in economy if our partners want to cooperate with us.
Прошу прощения, телекомпания «Мир» у нас была вот в том числе.
Mir TV channel, please. Hello, Mr. President. Saida Jarkimova. I'm from Kazakhstan. I'm here to present Mir TV company. I have a question related to integration processes. Starting with January 1st, the Eurasian Economic Union is going to come into force. The union of Kazakhstan, Belarus, and Russia, Armenia, and Kyrgyzstan are going to join the union. Given the crisis developments in our economies, are there reasons to be concerned? Could you comment on your predictions, on your vision of the common market? You know, Kazakhstan, as well as the Russian Federation, is a country that produces oil and gas. And it is not even related to integration. I'm not referring to integration at the moment. I'm just saying that Kazakhstan is facing the unfavorable economic situation at the moment. Speaking about whether we will be able to overcome those economic difficulties, we will definitely be. And I've already mentioned that the global economy is growing, and there is growing demand for energy resources. And of course our economies will anyway adapt even to low prices for energy resources. But speaking about the offer, the proposal that Mr. Nazarbayev made and that we are implementing at the moment is as follows. What we suggested is that it is easier to work together in economy. We can create a single economic space for free movement of capital, human resources and goods. Of course it is easier to do that together. And throughout the existence of the customs union, our turnover has increased 50-fold, 50 times. And it is a very impressive indicator. And of course we are going to further benefit from the integration. Крестьянская жизнь, please. It is very important to give you the floor. Given that we've produced 104 billion of tons this year, our harvest is very big. Hello, Svetlana Samsonova, Крестьянская жизнь newspaper. I'm from Volgograd. My question is definitely related to the development of our agricultural sector. The development of the agricultural sector is impossible without addressing the human resources issues. Let me give you an example. There's a farmer, Mikhail Rotov, in our area. And one of his workers recently resigned. And then the farmer was trying to find a worker to replace him, but no one wanted to work for the farm. And I know that other farmers are facing a similar situation, especially in vegetables growing. No one is going to do the work that is on the land, on the soil. People are not willing to work on the soil. And farmers believe that there might rise a threat to our food security next year. What do you think we can do to address the problems we are facing in the agricultural sector? Of course, I share your concerns related to the agriculture. It is very hard to work in the current conditions, but at the same time, we cannot but share the optimism of those who believe that cleaning out the domestic market for internal producers opens new opportunities for the farmers, for the Russian market. Of course, we have to think about addressing the issues and human resources preparation. Of course, we have to think about vocational training for specialists and other education opportunities. We just have to benefit from what we've got. We have very good vocational education facilities who prepare the specialists in agriculture area. We have Agriculture Academy which has recently joined one of other big academies, and I suppose it will be beneficial for this important area of the Russian economy. As well, just yesterday we discussed that with the head of government, and we took a decision to add 20 more billion to support the agriculture. So the total is going to be about 200 billion rubles. And I hope that our agriculture workers and farmers will appreciate it and benefit from it. What is very important to do now is to make sure that the funds that they get when selling their grain, their harvest, which is about 104 million tons, we have to make sure that these funds reach the end users, that they're not all received by the intermediaries. And speaking about the human resources, we have to provide for the relevant vocational training, of course, and for the employment. And speaking about the prices for the industrial goods, I realize that they're growing. And of course, it is not a good thing for consumers, but it is a very good chance for agriculture producers. And I hope they will benefit from it. Well, the journalist in front of Mr. Putin, could you please introduce yourself?
Good afternoon, Alena Yevtikova, the Voronezh region, the Gubernia TV channel. Mr. President, our region ranks now among the first 10 as far as new buildings, new accommodation is concerned. And as far as the mortgages are concerned, the program Young Family, how is it going to look in future? How are the mortgages going to be provided? And I have to ask you something else. When preparing for this journey, I asked my acquaintances what you would ask the president. He said, is the best bridegroom bachelor of Russia? Mr. President, do you have any time for the personal life? Could you please answer that question first? Well, please pass my cordial welcome to the friends that you were talking to before this journey. Thanks very much. Now to the mortgage. The mortgage is very important, certainly now that the repo rate is 17%. It's very hard to get a mortgage, if at all possible. But I have to say that over this year and over the recent years, mortgages have been developing far faster than we have expected. I don't want to make a mistake now, but the rate was greater than we anticipated. At first it was 9.5%, then 10%. People were very active in taking mortgages. Moreover, since the central bank discount rate raised from 5.5% and started to increase, people did not become less active in taking mortgages, and the rates of mortgages were not revisited. And now I do hope that the mortgage rates are not going to be revisited, well, at least in the near future, because that's very important for the people. That's very important for the economy, because 30 to 35% of all the mortgage financing is flowing into the construction sector, and that is a very important litmus test for the rest of the industry. Without a doubt, if this rate stays at the current rate for some time, the government and the central bank will have to think about special instruments to support the mortgages. I refer in particular to those who need help. I refer to young people, military recruits, scientists, doctors, teachers. Well, the most obvious instrument is, of course, subsidizing. I don't think we'll be able to come up with anything else. And that's important, and that is feasible. This segment is important both to the people and to the economy, and if we can't preserve it, then we have to As I've already told you, the repo rate has been increased to preserve the macroeconomic stability in the country, because it is the macroeconomic stability that will help us preserve a sane economy. And if the economy is sane, then we have grounds to believe that sooner or later we will reach a stable and steady rate of development. Let me draw your attention to the fact that despite the changes of the repo rate, the rate for small and medium enterprises has been preserved at the level of 6.5% by the central bank, whereas other projects have the rate which stands at 9%. The only thing that's not good enough is that some projects have not yet been covered. Anyway, if there is a good project, if there is a profitable economic project, then you have to come to a commercial bank. This commercial bank should come to the Special Government Commission. The Commission has to confirm that the project that has been proposed is a feasible one and a viable one, and then the bank will get the liquidity from the central bank. And the rate is going to be either 6.5% or 9%. So these instruments have been preserved for the small and medium enterprises and for project financing. And the same can be done for mortgages, I believe. Now, as for your aunt, well, everything is just fine. Please don't worry. And I've already passed my warmest welcome to her. You know, a friend of mine, a dignitary from Europe, recently told me, you know, do you have love? What do you mean? I asked. Do you love someone? Yes, I do. And is there anyone who doesn't love you? Yes, I have people who love me. I told him, everything is just fine, please don't worry. And I have very good relations with Lyudmila, friendly relations. We see each other regularly. But of course, with my children, everything is fine as well, even though I do not see them as often as I would like. Probably we could give the floor to our colleagues from Georgia. Oh yes, just a second, please. Let me give the floor to this person, Mr. Gentleman from Turkey, please. Or from Georgia, well. Mr. President, good afternoon. The reporter, newspaper, the city of Kirov, Vyatka. You're not from Turkey? Oh yes, no, I'm not from Turkey. Anyway, thank you for giving the floor to me. Against the backdrop of global macroeconomic issues and aunts and all other things, a trivial question, really. There were questions asked about the agriculture, about that agricultural worker. I believe that's a very good question. You know, right now, we're creating a Vyatsky class. Oh, I see, you've taken something already. Yes, I wanted to get you something, but unfortunately they didn't give me a chance to take our kvass from Vyatka here. Oh, yes, I see. We produce very much kvass in Vyatka. Yes, I see. Yes, we've been producing for a very long time. But the problem is this kvass cannot be retailed, distributed through shops, through Ashan, even though the taste of our kvass is wonderful. It's better than Coca-Cola or anything else. What should we do? Is there any place, any chance we can get access to the market? Well, jokes aside, I think this is the right question. I don't know whether Coke is a harmful drink, but many experts believe that it is harmful, especially for children. I don't want to offend anyone, I don't want to offend Coke, but the thing is, we have our national beverages. non-alcoholic beverage. I believe this kvass is not alcoholic, right? And other beverages, kvass, our water, which is just wonderful. We have to promote these products. We cannot do it through orders, through decrees. We cannot chase away your competitors from the market. We cannot chase those investors who have already managed to get a niche of the market. But what we can do and what we will do is we will help you conquer your place under the sun in the Russian market. Now let's give the floor to your colleague from Turkey. The Turkish Information Agency. Mr. President, you have recently visited Turkey with an official visit, and quite strangely, the European bureaucrats also visited Turkey, and they were quite hasty about that. They wanted to convince Turkey to join the sanctions against Russia. Can you comment on that a little bit? And what is your view on the prospects for bilateral relations, the relations between Turkey and Russia? The second question is as follows. There is a non-recognized country, Northern Cyprus. They've been suffering from sanctions for the last 40 years. They expect Russia to help them. What's view on that? Let me start with the last question as far as Northern Cyprus is concerned. As you're aware, we are trying to stick to a balanced position. We want this issue to be resolved in a manner which would suit both the northern part and the southern part of the island, but the Turkish and the Greek parts of the island. We have very good relations with Turkey, and that extends to our relations with Northern Cyprus. Well, of course, we also have very good relations with Greece, both at the religious level and at other levels. Just as we have done over the recent years, we will pursue a balanced approach. We want people to come to an agreement on their own. No external arrangements should be imposed. Well, of course, there are grounds for optimism. There are contacts maintained. As far as I know, there is liberalization in place. Now, as regards the EU attempts at convincing Turkey to join the sanctions, well, we understand that. When I was there, I asked Mr. Erdogan whether we should keep silent about some issues, not to create annoyance or irritation. Well, he's a very tough man, and he said that we have nothing to conceal. They have nothing to hide. Because we're not trying to steal anything from anyone. We are just talking about our bilateral relations. You know, our history is very rich. There has been many tragedies and many good things as well. And the same goes to our bilateral relations during the reign of Atatürk. The relations between different countries in Europe were not always that good as well. Anyway, let's have a look at France and Germany. They used to fight the First World War, the Second World War, the 19th century, and yet they have managed to foster good relations between each other. We have to emulate these examples. Turkey and Russia, and I'd like to emphasize that, have many coinciding regional interests. And more than that, without Turkey and Turkey's help in resolving different regional issues, we won't be able to resolve them. That's why we're going to follow this path. Just a second, please. Xinhua, please. We have to give the floor to the Chinese agency. Thank you, the Xinhua Chinese Information Agency. Mr. President, what is your assessment of the development of the Russian-Chinese relations? What is your assessment of what has happened in this year, and what is your view on the prospects for these relations next year? As is known, next year the BRICS and the SCO summits are going to be organized. How do you assess the interaction between China and Russia within these formats? Let me start by answering to your last question. We all know that the SCO was established as a structure to resolve trans-border issues after the dissolution of the USSR. I refer in particular to the border issues between China and post-Soviet republics. I believe that the SCO has been quite efficient in resolving these issues. Fortunately, we didn't have any conflicts. All the issues that arose back then have been successfully resolved based on the interests of China and all the other SCO member countries, including Russia. But now this structure has transcended its starting borders, speaking virtually, of course, speaking figuratively. It has now extended its purview into new domains because this organization is in demand. It is needed. This would not have happened if the member states of the SCO had not understood that there is an interest in working together. And there is this interest. As you are aware, Iran, Pakistan, India, and a number of other countries have expressed their interest in joining the SCO. They are either observers or countries with which the SCO cooperates, and now they have already applied for a full membership in the SCO. Both Pakistan and India have done so. We are now considering their bids. This certainly influences the relations between China and Russia. We know very well that China is our largest trade partner. Our trade is $90 billion this year. It is growing despite all the difficulties the world economy is going through. And I have no doubts that it's going to grow in further. Our goal is to diversify our trade. And we're taking steps in that direction, quite positive steps. I mean that we are paying greater attention to change in the structure of our trade, expanding the share of high technologies. As you are aware, we are building nuclear power plants, and we're going to continue to do so if China is interested in that. We are participating in joint projects in exploring the outer space, in creating aviation, helicopters. We are also cooperating in a number of other promising dimensions. But what is most important, we have many coinciding interests in the international arena. I refer in particular to the stabilization of the international situation. We cooperate closely within the United Nations and the United Nations Security Council. Russia-China cooperation within this format is indubitably one of the major elements which stabilize the situation in today's world. Financial Times, please.
Financial Times.
Hello, I'm from Financial Times. I have a question about Yevtushenko. Yesterday he was released, and there is a penal case which has been brought against him right after he has been released. Does this mean that the rules of game in Russia are changing? I mean, the rules of game for a businessman. Yes, I see. Thank you. The Bashneft case has nothing to do with revisiting the outcome of privatization. Why? Because the court does not raise any doubts about the legitimacy of the privatization. Doubts are raised about transferring property from the federal authorities to municipal authorities and regional authorities. It has nothing to do with privatization. The only thing the investigative committee suspects Mr. Yevtushenko of is that, knowing about the great value of this asset, when this asset was the property of a Russian constituted body, when that asset was $5 to $7 billion, he bought it for $2 billion. So he bought it at a lower price. So he helped legalize these assets. So he assisted in money laundering. The investigation has not yet been able to prove this fact and has been acquitted.
And as for transferring this asset to federal level, it only is related to transferring the asset from federal to regional level. And I believe the whole system that did a lot for developing the microelectronics and worked actively in other dimensions, for example, in the energy complex, and they worked in markets. I'm going to meet our leading businessman before New Year. That's a regular thing, and Mr. Yevtushenko, of course, is invited as well. Mr. President, maybe Georgia? Yes, please. You have the floor. I was already thinking you didn't want to answer. Georgian TV company Maestro. Mr. President, what are the prospects of the Russian-Georgian relations? Does Russia believe it's a done case? Maybe we're going to raise those relations to a new level. Maybe they require more active actions as Georgian relations with the European Union. Maybe the leaders of the Russia and Georgia could discuss the case, and what would be the role of Russia in settling the conflict. I believe that from the Russia's part, the territory of Georgia was occupied and the conflict remains unsettled. What could Russia propose, please? You know, the matter is, just like with the southeast of Ukraine, the matter is we should talk to people who live in that land, on that land. Earlier, I used to talk with Mikhail Saakashvili, who is now on the run, and the problem is that he has to flee from one place to another place. It was not our initiative, it was not our doing, and he doesn't even, he isn't even able to acquire a working visa to the United States. I urged him not to start hostilities. No, of course. But he started that, and there you have it. It will be very difficult right now. I understand the pain of Georgia, of the Georgian people. It's a bleeding wound. But 1919, everyone remembers that year. The grave situation after the dissolution of Russian Empire. Georgia declared its independence, and Abkhazia said they are going to stay with Russia, and there were the same punitive operation and hostilities. That's not forgotten. That's not made up. Everyone accuses us of all the 7 mortal sins, but that was not our work, and we are going to help settle the matters. After though our warnings were ignored, hostilities started, and we acknowledged the independence of those republics. We recognized the independence. frankly speaking, it's very difficult, but at the first stage we have to establish direct contacts. There should be dialogue. We shouldn't reject from step one all possibilities. We should start the process. Where it leads us, I cannot possibly say. What else? And as for the meeting, you know, in Georgia, we have very little contacts, unfortunately. And there is internal power struggle there, ongoing internal power struggle. As for liberalizing the shipments of Georgian goods to Russia, we did that in response to the promise of Georgia not to stop Russia from entering the WTO. Despite our political differences, that was a very welcome gesture from the Georgian authorities, and we answer that with opening our markets to them. We are ready to follow on that, in that direction. And if Georgian leaders are deem that necessary, we will be very happy to see Georgian President, Georgian Premier in Moscow. Mr. President, maybe our colleagues from Chechnya, because we mentioned Chechnya. Please, you have the floor. Good afternoon, Mr. President. Karimov, Press Secretary of the Chechen Republic. We had the Dialogues TV program, and you were there. I'm very grateful for that. I have the following question. Of course, there are sanctions and not very friendly relations of different countries towards Russia, but we see that there have been Slavic peoples that joined that we always considered friendly. In that regard, I would like to hear your opinion on the prospects of the Slavic peoples, Serbia, Poland, Czech Republic, Bulgaria, if those peoples could form a friendly, not maybe state, but alliance in prospect, so that they could help us in international affairs, just like it is done with English-speaking countries. And another question I have, Ms. Sobchak has not been very straight with the facts. Mr. Kadyrov has never violated Constitution, and he will never let Constitution be violated in the territory of the Republic. I was silent when you blatantly Ms. Sobchak, you were not stopped from asking the question. I have the following question. When innocent people, people that work on the roads, teachers, journalists, when their lives are put in danger, when their comrades die, when a road inspector that was on his post, he left, and 4 his children were left as orphans, and he had a pregnant wife, and when the head of the republic knows exactly when that certain families were in contact with the militants, and not militants, terrorists, there are no more militants in Chechnya. And when they were asked to get back those people, but they called those people in the woods. They were asked about their comfort, and that, according to law, is helping terrorists. And when he says that those people should be held responsible, do you believe if in regard of terrorists, if we should use all the means that we have, so that not to endanger the lives of hundreds and thousands. If we hadn't taken measures, we would have more than 500,000 people, victims. I understand the grief of people, of the families of people who dies, and I'm sure that Mr. Kadyrov will never leave those people alone. As for helping terrorists, of course, all the accomplices should be brought to justice, but of course within the law. But what really was the case, I repeat, that will be clear during the investigation. And the fact that we have combat terrorism in all dimensions, including helping the terrorists, but of course within the law. Oh yes, as for Slavic countries, you know, they're in a very difficult economic situation, and that means they're dependent and they're under pressure. You see that pressure is of course due to economic situation and with sanctions, and we are being put under pressure, but those minor countries are of course more susceptible, and their sovereignty is going through hard times. But I know that within a people the will to certain, if not political, but cultural and spiritual unity prevails, will prevail, and will not go away, and it cannot be eradicated. Maybe the outer radio that have been a long time within the Kremlin pool. Please, you have the floor. Good afternoon, Natalia Sildemira, Alta Radio, and as I represent the radio station that is related to cars, I will have the questions related to that. First of all, when we introduced the anti-sanctions, there were rumors that imported vehicles would be outlawed, but of course the situation is that they are not imported, not outlawed, but still, theoretically, in general, is that possible? And another question, it's not... I, of course, have on special occasion this little crocodile with me. You know that evacuation vehicles are called crocodiles on the roads, but the situation is that people cannot handle great fines they face. If a person parked his vehicle near his home, at night it could be just moved away, and the person could be fined 3,000 ruble for illegal parking, but that's not evacuated, and a person has to pay a lot more money, and it's not very evident. But do you think that's fair in this difficult economic situation? And the first part was, please, the first part? Yes, about the imported cars. The first one. As for imported vehicles, really, after we faced this sanctions situation, of course, we in the government started to think how we could respond, and one of the possibilities was to ban the import new and used cars. Why was that the case? Because all the world brands are already active in Russia. And the interdiction to import new cars would support domestic production, and it would be harsh for the economies of the countries that export cars here. But you are right. Right now it has no sense because the currency rates have dealt with that situation, and we are going to work with other producers that come to Russia, agree to localization and start working. As for evacuations of vehicles, of course, everything should be in due measure. Besides the car users, there are pedestrians who are not very satisfied that in some places, especially in the center of Moscow, one cannot just drive but simply walk. And the Moscow government had to resolve the situation there. And within the active rules, they had to take measures. And those rules had to be made in contact with the public, and that should have been discussed with the Russian People's Front and had to be discussed with the Moscow Duma. It had to be discussed with all the participants of the movement. And of course, those fines should be according to people's incomes. I'm not sure what the exact volumes are, but that should be according. Maybe from that side, with a Tsar on a journal, you see Kaliningrad. Please, you have the floor as we are talking about Russian regions. Good afternoon, Mr. President. Thank you for letting me ask you a question. I'm Yelena Yesmachi, a Kaliningrad journal from Kaliningrad region. Everyone understands that we live detached from the great part of Russia, and you see that's the situation, we and the great Russia. And around us, there are our friends, we consider them friends, we visit them quite often, but from the other side, we get news that they are reinforcing the NATO forces, that they are trying to defend themselves from us, that we are going to attack them. Aren't you? No, not really. Yes, that's red shooting. No, the question is, how is Russian military presence going to be enhanced in Kaliningrad region? And what is the situation with the building of a Baltic nuclear power plant? My understanding is that the construction of Baltic power plant is underway, and it's quite efficient. The Rosatom company is working, and all the technologies that are used in Russia and exported are the technologies of post-Fukushima level that would be raised security and safety levels, and I believe that none of our competitors have not yet introduced those technologies. The second part, as for the relations with our neighbors, I know that on regional level there are friendly relations without any exaggerations, and the leaders of the region and municipalities in Kaliningrad regions, they said that they are very interested in developing those trans-border relations. There have been a lot of people come from Poland, from Germany, and our citizens go abroad. And I believe that we should abandon those phobias, and we should continue our relations. And please, veterans, good afternoon, Mr. President. The Novaya Жизнь journal. Next year we will be celebrating the 70th anniversary of our victory in Great Patriotic War. The veterans of the Great Patriotic War are very grateful that you helped them to improve their housing issues, housing problems, but there are certain categories of citizens that worked back in the country. They were very useful in defeating Nazism. And do you think that they deserve some of help as well? We, of course, presume that those who worked in the country and the veterans of the peace front, so to speak, deserve help. And I understand the matter that you raised. But when we took the decision about providing housing to the veterans of the Great Patriotic War, we presumed a certain figure, tens of thousands of people. But when we started allocating housing, we learned that there are hundreds of thousands, and that figure was going up, and that was very difficult in terms of budget. So first we have to do everything we had to for the veterans of the Great Patriotic War, but of course, definitely, we should consider the question of helping the people who worked back in the country. I'm speaking very carefully, because before making a statement in public, before all the country, first we should consider all the variables, especially in these conditions. Please read like a young lady without any... Yes, собеседник. Without any hope, she will be noticed. Hello, thank you for noticing me. Rihanna Nalbandian, собеседник journalist. This year we are celebrating your record rating of popularity, and recently one of the organizations learned that Russian citizens named you Person of the Year. The problem is that your nearest competitors had 2 or 4%. You were very much in the lead. Do you ever feel lonely in political field? I'm not at all bored. And you know, I have talked multiple times about that. That's not very important. Yet we should take it very seriously. We should work. We should do what we have to, not think if we could keep a certain phone. When we think about preserving ratings, the very second the rating starts to drop, because instead of working for the benefit of the country, one starts doing nothing. I hope to preserve this style in future.
And this style did not let me down, and I hope to keep it for the future. Not just to leave it on paper, but so that the people of the country would feel the better conditions. Now you, please, the lady with... Yes, thank you. Otherwise, I have had a coup from my heads. Oh, the free mass media is such. Your manager would hit you. Mr. President, I'd like to continue the topic which my colleague started, the fifth column and enemies of Russia. Do you think some categories of Russia, or categories of people, are enemies of Russia? I mean, the heads of the state companies who ask for trillions of loans, and then they buy iPhones for the millions, and then they throw out the bonds on the market and write out the bonuses for the $1 million to themselves. And there are some people from your close circles who live in the palaces, and our ordinary grandmothers count for the kopecks which they can spend on their bread. Federal countries show the crucified children features, and they damage your image abroad. Do you think the enemies are the politicians who called upon beginning the aggressive war in Ukraine when we had this difficult situation, and those Siloviks who were absolutely neutral to that, to these claims? And how about the accusations of supporters of Navalny in stealing the painting, when the author of the painting said that there has been no stealing? And the last, what is the annual salary of Igor Sechin? Well, sorry, I do not know the salary of Igor Sechin. Even I don't know the amount of my salary, because they bring it to me and they just send it to account and do not count it. As far as Sechin is concerned, I don't know. But I really know that the leaders of our large companies, of course, receive good money. But we must look at their level of salary, not compared with the average salary in the country. Of course, we must have it in mind, but we must analyze their salary in comparison with the salary of their colleagues in the corporations in the world. Because today Sechin works there, tomorrow we might invite a foreign expert, but in order to invite him, well, I do not want it to look as if we are going to fire Sechin. No, he is a good worker. He is an efficient manager, by the way. But I'm not speaking about Sechin. I'm speaking about the fact that we could invite some foreign experts to some companies, but we can't pay one salary to foreign specialists, experts, and the other salary to our own. We need to compare them. We need to make them leveled. So this populism of yours is not quite to the place. But of course, we might bear the elements of the social justice. How? By avoiding these golden parachutes. They must be cleaned out, of course, I agree. And it's not only us who are doing that. Other countries do that as well, and we should do that in future. Now, as far as the officials from my close circles are concerned, I have no officials in my close circles. They're all colleagues, but they're not my close circles. I'm not close with any one of them, and I'm not going to be. There is governmental functions which is not possible to perform when you are personally attached to a person. I have understood that a long time ago, and I am trying to have certain distance from all of them, but with a friendly business relations as the colleagues. Of course, you could criticize the officials, but I would like to remember you that the destiny of the many millions of our citizens depends on the efficient work of these officials. But are there any parameters that they excessively act in their actions? Of course there might be. And if mass media draw our attention to those negative features, that would be the best way to avoid these excessive activities. Everyone has the right to have his own opinion, everyone has the right to speak out his position, but I remind you, it should be done within the acting legislation and without bearing monopoly for the truth in the last resort. Now, on Iran, okay, where's the question about Iran? It's here, yeah, here, yeah, it's written Iran here, to the left. Oh, here, okay. Rajab Safarov, the Business Iran journal. Mr. President, a year ago, you, here in this hall, announced that Iran is our neighbor. It is one of the priority partners. I'm quoting you now. Thank you for your trust. And we are going to develop the relations in all the directions with this country. And this is our principal choice, you said. The year has passed, turnover has decreased, and no special contacts that could lead to some particular large agreements emerged. Iran is not called to the SCO. Iran is not in the Eurasian community. Iran does not participate in large energy projects. The large oil contract which you signed at the beginning of this year has not been implemented. And I'm building on the fact that the existing turnover this year is less than 0.5% of the turnover with other countries that Russia has. So there's a paradox. No one in Russia actually is responsible for this state of relations. None of the officials is held responsible for lower turnover with Iran. Maybe you should think about ordering someone to be a representative of the president or representative of the government responsible for the turnover with Iran and the development of trade and economic relations with it. And the last question. A lot depends on the actions of the ambassadors. Maybe you should analyze the activities of the ambassadors in some other perspective. If an ambassador, for example, does not contribute to trade and economic development of relations, for example, by 5%, then you might criticize them. If it is next year, you might change an ambassador. And I believe that the interaction of Iran and Russia would give a lot. Last year you promised to visit Iran. It hasn't happened. You promised to sign large economic agreement with Iran. It hasn't happened either. And I do not understand. Have there been any changes to your strategy, or has just your order not been implemented? Thank you. Well, first, as far as the ambassadors are concerned, of course, constant improvement of interstate relations is one of their duties, but the increased turnover is not directly within his duties. So if we act according to your recommendations, we'll not have any ambassadors to be ambassadors. And what is the efficiency of the diplomatic mission's work in this or that country is determined by the Minister of Foreign Affairs. And in the end, your humble servant, according to the reports of the Minister of Foreign Affairs. Of course, after your question, we will analyze the efficiency of our embassy in Iran. But on the whole, we are satisfied with their work. As far as the turnover is concerned, of course, it has fallen down a little bit, and we discussed that with the President of Iran. We are taking steps to improve it and improve the structure of it and the volumes of it. It does not depend only on us. That depends on the overall situation in the global economy. And this is the objective process, if I may say so, because Iran is an oil and gas producing, extracting country, and their economy is largely linked to the world oil sector. Now we are witnessing the falling down of prices, of oil prices, and there are many discussions on that topic. Why is that happening? Whether there is a conspiracy between the Saudi Arabia and the US in order to punish Iran and influence the economy of Russia, Venezuela, etc. There might be, or might be not. Maybe it's just the struggle of the traditional producers of raw materials with the shale oil, for example. Maybe you just hold the price and thus you squeeze the shale oil producers out of market, and then you could increase the price. We can't tell for sure what the cause is, but could the interests of the US administration and the main oil producers coincide? Of course, because the US administration are very calm about the investments done by private companies to shale oil extraction. For them, the overall level of prices is important, but if it will remain low, then the companies would stop investing in hardly extractable deposits. And against the backdrop of the growing global economy, the prices would just lift up and so much that it would be even bad for industrially developed countries. Most people, by the way, understand that. And our Chinese friends understand that too. They are not interested in oil going too low and in low oil prices for a long time. But Iran depends on that directly, and you can't do anything with that. We are looking for opportunities to diversify our cooperation with Iran, and will continue to do so. And we are doing that sincerely. We have some success and have some failures. We are cooperating in machinery construction, in air construction, etc., besides oil and gas sector. But the contract which you mentioned, we wanted to to implement it. And you are not correct when we say that there is no one responsible for that. Our Minister for Energy has had multiple visits to Iran and invited his partners here. It was a very difficult process of looking for a compromise and mutually acceptable solution, and this solution has been found. And the situation with the calculations is very difficult there. There is a whole range of problems, but on the whole we have solved it. It needs will from both sides. The contracts in oil need to be beneficial for everyone, because not the government will be selling the Iran oil. The companies would do that. And we have to make the contracts beneficial for them. But we are interested in it, even though it is difficult. And we will continue doing that in order to find the ways to expand our turnover. And of course, we'll work together with our Irani partners to solve the nuclear program of Iran issue. And I believe we are very close to finding the solution to this problem, because the leaders of Iran are demonstrating great flexibility, I believe, and I do not understand why the final or the last resolution on the nuclear program of Iran has been signed. I hope that will happen in the nearest future, and if it is so, we will see change in our economic linkages. By the way, my visit to Tehran is quite possible, and we are now agreeing on the terms of that via diplomatic channels in order to find the time which would be acceptable for me and our partners. I was to Tehran. You know, the visit for the sake of the visit is not quite important, because when I visit Tehran, I will meet the president. But I have just met him multiply, and we will continue to meet each other. We'll continue our contacts. If we think that we need a separate visit, we have no limitations about that. There is no external pressure on that. We promised them that we'll build a nuclear power plant, and we have done it. We have signed a new contract on continuation of our joint work, and we have done it. So the question is just technical, and we'll work on that. There's a girl with the writing "Mama" there on her sheet of paper. Thank you very much, Mr. President. Olga Panina, the Open Russia Journal, and the President of the Union of Mothers of Russia. The question is, recently there has been information in the mass media that the Stadium is considering the draft law on the revival of the Heroine Mother title in Russia, which gives certain preferences in pensions and payments. Do you support the opportunity to revive this title under the current situation? And if the answer is positive, could you personally assist to the adoption of such draft law, or put forward such a proposal? Well, you know how I treat everything which is linked to demography or demographic situation. And here, the support of families with many children, of women who have taken a decision to give birth to many babies, or even a first baby. It is a very important matter, including the financial component and moral component of it. So I will, of course, be ready to support everything linked with the families, motherhood, and childhood. When we introduced the mother capital, then I told it was done in order to support women financially and morally. But I believe that the men in our country understand that quite well. And I see that this decision has support not only from the women, but also from the men in our society, because men always bear special heaviness of duties, but we love our women, and that's why men support this initiative and will continue to implement it. We will always look for financial opportunities and will take all the steps to morally support the women. I will look at the level of adoption of this draft law, and I see no obstacles to move this draft law forward. You know, we've been talking with you for more than 3 hours, and we need to wrap up a little bit. So the last three questions, please. Pro TV. Nadezhda Pashikhonova, 2 TV. We represent the Volgograd 1 channel in Volgograd. You've been talking a lot about an independent TV channel which needs to be created. But since January 2015, a draft law on the forbidding of advertisements on the federal channels goes into force. Does not it actually contradict the policy for the free press? Because many channels also receive dotations from the budget and they can't be independent. And a personal question. Our channel is broadcasted via cables, and we are, of course, not paid, and we pay to the cable companies to be present there. And even our lawyers could not understand whether the law which is to be adopted and to enter into force be touched upon our channel. Well, you know, I'm afraid I will not be able to answer you in great detail, but the law is adopted on the economic speculations or thoughts, because the market of advertisement is always getting narrower, and we must take a decision how we support the federal channels, either directly from the federal budget, which is quite difficult because we have other problems with pensions and other payments, the supporting army, etc., which is directly linked to the budget. Or should we give the opportunity to the federal channels to use the volumes of the advertising market, the commercial market? It was not our decision or our proposal. It was not initiated by the authorities. This law was initiated by the representatives of the mass media. Well, the heads of the channels. Whether it is good or bad, I don't know, but the logic is that if the cable channels exist, no one is closing them, but they must learn how to earn money themselves, including by going to the paying for their work or getting payment for the commercials. And whether the audience wants to pay for it or not is their case.
SOS, what does that mean? SOS, please, the floor is yours. Hello. I'm here to represent the Crimean Tatar Channel 1. I actually wanted to give the floor to the young man next to you, but let it be you then. This is the first Crimean Tatar channel, Crimea Simferopol. Back in spring, you adopted a decree on rehabilitation of the ethnic groups deported from the Crimea, but unfortunately local authorities have not yet taken any steps to implement the decree. Why do you think it has happened this way? I do not think that the decree has not been implemented at all. First, no one can denounce the decree because we declared the political rehabilitation of every people, every ethnic group that suffered, both the Greek, the Armenians, the Bulgarians, all those who were persecuted. And I think it is very important morally and politically. We also declared at the federal level, and we adopted the relevant tools. You've just mentioned the decree yourself, and we adopted the decision that all the necessary languages, the Russian, the Ukrainian, the Crimean Tatar language, all of them are state languages. And it is a very important thing. It is very important for the state of the nation. That enables them to feel full-fledged citizens of the Russian Federation. And of course, all those laws and documents have to be implemented. But that's not all I wanted to say. The very important issue is related to legalizing the land. And I realize that this nation, Crimean Tatars, only constitutes a part of people who live in the Crimea, and some of them do not agree to the decision. if we authorize the so-called self-seizures or squattering of lands, it will not be a good practice. But what I'd like to emphasize is that we are very concerned with the destiny of the nations and the ethnic groups that were persecuted. It is very important to provide for the observation of all the laws, no matter what the ethnicity of a person is. And, of course, the local authorities have to find the solutions that could be acceptable for everyone and would enable the implementation of the decree and the relevant laws. I know that the issue was discussed in the Crimean Parliament. If there hasn't been any final decision so far, it should be adopted in the near future. What I also wanted to say is that we are developing a program according to which all the nations that were repressed and persecuted, that suffered the repressions, including the Crimean Tatars, are supposed to have the social benefits. They are supposed to be given the relevant infrastructure, the roads and all the infrastructure they need. Unfortunately, we cannot implement the projects just today or tomorrow because we do not have enough money for that. We did not even have enough money in the years when our incomes were higher, but we have to work out where and how we want to implement those infrastructure projects. Final questions, please. The question on economy, please. We started with economy, so probably it is a good idea to finish with economy. Thank you. Let us go back to economy then. Mr. Putin, you said that the ruble is tumbling due to the decrease in oil prices, but the ruble rate started to decrease 2 years ago, in 2013, and the ministers of the economic bloc in government mentioned some economic problems and the decrease in oil prices back then. And it's something similar to a cold, you know. If a person is generally healthy, then a cold is not very harmful for him. But if he suffers lots of diseases, then a cold can be very dangerous. Do you think the decrease in ruble is the result of the reforms that were implemented during the last 2 or 3 years? And do you think that you personally can be accountable for the economic problems that we are facing at the moment? The tumbling ruble, the plummeted ruble, and all that. And have you already taken the decision whether to run the next presidential elections or not? And what does that decision depend on? Well, it actually depends on the measures that we take at the country's level, at the measures that we take at the national level. I think it is too early to make any decisions related to running for the president's office or not. What we have to do at the moment is to work for the good of our citizens. And then, when we see the results of our work and the public opinion, then we'll decide who is to run the presidential elections in 2018. Another thing that I'd like to mention is that the head of state is always responsible for everything that is taking place in a state. And I never try to evade the responsibility. And speaking about the mistakes that we might have made, well, people always make mistakes. But what we have to attach importance to is that we have to increase the level of responsibility of the employees of the central bank, the employees of the officials of the government of the Russian Federation, for the outcomes of their work at the sectors that they are responsible for. At the same time, we think that on the whole, the administrative structures, including the government and the financial agencies, financial authorities of the country, are doing very well in addressing the issues that they are facing. And are addressing the issues we are facing in a very efficient manner. I stated that at the beginning of our press conference, and let me finish with it. We are going through a trying period, through difficult times at the moment, due to many objective and maybe even subjective circumstances and factors. Maybe we might have taken the relevant decisions more expediently and in advance. Maybe we should have taken better articulated decisions, but still I believe that the strategy that the central bank is pursuing at the moment is quite adequate, and I hope that in order to maintain the stability of the macroeconomic situation based on our reserves, we will be able to address the social tasks that were mentioned in the President's decrees of May 2012, and will also be able to overcome the difficulties that we are facing at the moment, either in the near term or in the mid-term prospect. And I explained why. I am sure that the economy will definitely adapt to new conditions and to the new situations when the price for energy sources is lower. Our economy is definitely going to adjust to new conditions and to get diversified. Even if we believe that the prices for energy resources remain low or even decrease, there will inevitably be a moment when the economy will continue to grow. Our economy will continue to grow because the global economy is growing and will continue to grow. And the demand for energy resources is definitely going to continue to grow. It is definitely going to happen. Of course, it depends on what the central authorities do, on what bank authorities do. We'll see what measures they will take, and we'll judge them later by the results that they will manage to achieve. But what we can be sure of is that we'll definitely overcome the period and all the difficulties, and we'll find a way out of the difficult today's situation. And I'm sure that we'll be stronger at the international arena and in the global economy. We have to keep in mind that all the resources that we've needed and we still need in order to fulfill our social obligations and our decisions taken in order to strengthen our defense capabilities, to upgrade our army and the navy forces. We've already planned allocation of the necessary resources for all that. And what matters most is that we definitely have to provide for the welfare of people. We have to adjust the pensions level for the retired people. In spite of lower budget incomes, budget revenues, we'll still be able to adjust the pension rates. And next year we are planning to adjust the pensions based on the actual inflation rates, not based on the forecasted inflation rates. And speaking about the citizens' welfare, all the issues in this area are particularly important for us, and that is what we are going to focus on in the near future. And I hope that all the issues will be resolved. Thank you a lot for your attention. Happy New Year!